Now, before I introduce our speaker and moderator for the evening, we'd like to tell you a little bit more about Square and how the company's impact is much larger than a little white card reader. Join me in watching this video.
Everyone knows Square for the little white thing that you plug into your phone to take credit cards. Yeah, you know, that one. We also have super simple pricing for all credit cards and as fast as next day deposits that make doing business easy for everyone. You can even get instant deposits when you really need the money right away. Didn't know that one? There might be a lot of things about Square that are new to you. We have a whole set of products that are made to work together to help sellers of all sizes sell more. Square has a countertop point of sale and a brand new reader that lets you accept chip cards and contactless payments like Apple Pay and Android Pay. Everything really comes together in the Square Register app. You take payments and we help you make sense of all that sales data so you can do better, smarter business. Want to bill your customers later? Send a Square invoice. It's as easy as email. We get that having funds to run your business is only kind of everything. That's why we offer loans through Square Capital, so you can hire more staff, get more inventory, or open a new location. There's a whole lot more, too. So as we were saying, we're much more than just that little white reader, which reminds us, you really should check out our new white reader. The Apple Pay is crazy fast.
Pretty amazing, coming from the McDonald's point-of-sale machine to where we are. I'd like to introduce our speaker and our moderator. Jack Dorsey co-founded Square in 2009 and currently serves as CEO and chairman. He's also CEO of Twitter and serves on the board of Disney. This guy gets around. Joining him on stage to ask all the provocative questions is Lauren Good, senior technology editor at The Verge. Please join me in welcoming Jack and Lauren.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So I want to get right to it. I'm wondering how frequently the president uses Square. Because we know he often uses the other platform you run.
I have never been asked that question.
Really? We're off to a great start. Well, that's good. I mean, if you don't know, obviously things are secure. You're not supposed to know. But also, we don't see the world react when it happens, if it does. So, no, but in all seriousness, I think a lot of people here probably know what Square is and what it does. And if not, you just saw that nice introductory video. So you do have an idea, but I'd love to sort of just do a little State of the Union on how Square is doing. You recently had a pretty positive quarterly earnings report. Your stock is up 96% year over year. You're starting to make money on things like peer-to-peer payments. How much are you processing now monthly?
Monthly, I don't believe we give out those numbers.
You can give it out now if you'd like.
I could, but I won't.
Okay. Since you started Square nearly a decade ago, at this point, 9 years ago, what has been the most significant or surprising change you've seen happen in the business?
In our business or the industry?
Both.
Both. Well, I think the, you know, when we started, we're having an offsite actually today and tomorrow. And we've been discussing a lot of the company's history and where we're going. And one of the things that we started with was, you know, we were trying to solve our co-founder's problem, which was he could not accept a credit card. So we got fixated on building a little device that you could plug into his smartphone that you could accept credit cards. And it definitely worked for him and it resonated with him, but we wanted to see if it resonated with other people as well. And we went down, I was living in a studio apartment, 5th and Mission in San Francisco. And we went down and there was a flower cart under my apartment. And we noticed she wasn't accepting credit cards and we asked her, do you want to accept credit cards? And she said, no, it's too complicated and they're too expensive and I hate them. And we said, okay. So we came back the next day, very persistent. We said, what about today? Like we did this, we made it work a little bit differently. You want to accept credit cards today? And she said, no. I tried to accept credit cards. I went to a bank, they denied me. No, I don't want to mess with it. Stop, leave me alone. We went back up. Next day we went down, asked her if she would want to accept credit cards, and she again said no. Stop asking me the question, do you want some flowers? And we went back the fourth day. And this time we just watched. We just watched what she was doing. And we saw a guy come up, and he wanted to buy some flowers. And he handed over a credit card. And she said, I don't accept that, but there's an ATM around the corner, and you can go get some cash. And we watched him walk away. And he went around the corner, and we waited for 5 minutes. And then we waited for 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes. The guy never came back. And then my co-founder, Jim, asked the question, do you want to make the sale? And she said, yeah, I will accept credit cards now. And that was the big insight for us. It wasn't that we were building a credit card machine. It was that we were enabling someone to participate in the economy in the first place and to be able to make the sale. And when we changed the mindset about helping someone make the sale instead of accepting a credit card, suddenly we could do so many different things to help them make the sale. The point of sale to organize their information, Square Capital to give them a loan of $6,000 to help make more sales. Then the universe was so much bigger than we originally thought it was. So that was probably the biggest surprise for us, and the biggest joy in the business was just those moments when we realized it wasn't just this mechanical thing, that had so much more potential. And I guess in the industry, I imagine a bunch of you, when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time on Usenet, and I really liked the alt subs, and I liked alt cyberpunk and cypherpunk. And one of the dreams of alt cypherpunk was digital currency. And it felt like such a far away reality and far away dream. And the fact that we have seen not just an adoption of it, but I think one of the most seminal works in computer science in the past at least decade, in the Bitcoin white paper, is amazing. It's amazing that we have a technology now that can actually once again distribute and decentralize something fundamental, in this particular case, a ledger and the extension of that, trust. So that I think is the biggest shift that certainly impacts our business, our industry, and a big part of how we live together and work together and trade together. So yeah, I'm really excited about learning from it first and foremost, and then figuring out how to do what I think we did well in the early days of Square, which is help people access the financial system in the first place. We were talking with merchants who weren't even able to participate. They were being denied. Only 30% of people who applied to accept credit cards actually got through the process, where we took that number up to 99%. So being able to accept the form of payment that people wanted to use meant that you got to participate. So we've just, since that day, asked the question again and again, how can we continue to build simple tools that empower people into the economy to make them more fulsome contributors? And we're not going to fix everything, but we'll contribute a small bit, and that'll be meaningful.
I remember interviewing you back in the very early days of Square at the Wall Street Journal, and it's interesting because the value proposition at the time was on the merchant side. Okay, now I'm accepting payment, I'm making the sale, and on the consumer side, there was still a little bit of that, what happens when you show up to a business and you don't have the cash, but you want to buy something, and so let's make it frictionless. And You had this app for a while, Square Wallet, where there was supposed to be this sort of ambient recognition of when someone was in a store and all of that. But now, just in this short amount of time, I mean, literally within almost a decade, people are talking about peer-to-peer as a legitimate business, a completely sort of cashless thing. We're talking, and I want to talk more about Bitcoin as we get to it, but I guess I'd like to talk, I love talking about peer-to-peer, so I'd love to talk about that first. This is something that you have said you're now starting to make money off of. How significant is that?
Well, so I guess, the other really hard thing for us in the early days is we weren't our customer. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is we're not sellers. We're not flower sellers. We're not coffee sellers. We don't own a restaurant. So when you are your customer and you're building for yourself, it's pretty evident what you need to do next and like what bothers you. And when you're not your customer, you have to ask a lot of questions. And one of the things that was really important to us was the realization that while we're not our customer, we are the customer of our customer. So we love places like Sight Glass Coffee and Blue Bottle, and we want to go up to the counter and we're not there to pay. We're not there to have a transaction. We're there to actually get a coffee and drink it. So how do we take that away completely? And the amazing thing about that business is the business is inherently there. We get a transaction fee every single time someone swipes a credit card. So every time that we help a seller make a sale or help a seller grow, our business grows. And if our business grows, then we can help more sellers grow as well. But we can also, as we grow, take on things that we just want to fix because we built all this infrastructure. So Square Cash represents that, where it was a desire of we wanted to build something for ourselves that we could use on a regular basis that was fixing a problem we were having, and that problem being we wanted a very simple, open, and fast way to send money to each other, and that was it. And there were certainly solutions out there. We didn't love them because the amount of work one had to do to sign up, the speed that it took, and really
Services
by
like
that I mean
Venmo and
slowness.
PayPal.
Yep. Yep. Well, the whole universe, Western Union, checks.
TransferWise.
Look at any way that you move money from one person to another, paper cash. So we wanted to make sending money as easy as me just telling you, here's $5. And when we first started, we really put some pressure on ourselves to like, how can I send you an email and CC Square Cash? In the subject line, I have $5, and the money is transferred just by sending that email. And the challenge here is how do we make that secure? Because email is inherently unsecure. Mm-hmm. And that really made us rethink everything. If we can make that secure, we can really take down some of the identity barriers that normal services have to go through to vet people. And we can make it feel like cash. I'm just saying I'm giving you $5 by writing it out, and that money is transferred automatically. The other thing is it has the network of email, which is infinite. So we started there, and then we made it into an app, but we took that same concept of we're going to make it feel easy, simple, free, and fast. But we have to now figure out how to support ourselves doing it. We need to figure out how to make it into a business. And so there's a few things that we realized along the way. One, that people will pay to hurry things up. Mm-hmm. So people will pay to get their access to their money instantly. So that's one thing that we offer both on the seller side and also on the individual side. And if you don't want to pay, it goes next business day, but if you do, it's instant. And you want to transfer it to your bank account. We also get paid if we enable people to spend it in more places or spend it in different ways. So we added a place to a stored value account so you could actually store your money, and then we also put a virtual card on top of it so you could spend money with it, and every time that card is used, we get paid not by the consumer, but by the banks and the financial networks. So there's no tax to the individual. And then the third way is if you don't have a bank account or you want to fund your Square account through a credit card, we take a transaction fee for that as well. So all three of those have added up to contributing a pretty meaningful amount that we're proud of and that we can extend. And we have diversity in as well. So if one fails or diminishes in some way, then we have two more to lean on. So we started this project as we did with Square, we need to build the network as fast as possible, and then we'll figure out how to make it work. And make it work means figuring out how to fund it and give it its own oxygen. And with Square, that decision was 2.75%. We priced credit card acceptance at 2.75%, and to put it in perspective, most merchants get charged anywhere from 1.69 to 7%. It's called the interchange. And that price is actually not dependent upon the merchant, it's dependent upon the card that the buyer is using. So oftentimes the rewards that you have on your cards, the merchant is actually subsidizing those, and they have no idea usually. So we decided that's way too complex, no one really understands it. It's pushing people out of accepting credit cards in the first place. So let's just simplify it down to one price, and that'd be 2.75%. But in making that decision, we knew that for the next at least 2 years, if not 3 years, we would be losing a lot of money. We would, that was existential. We could be losing so much money that we would go out of business. But we believed in ourselves enough, and we believed in the size of the network that we believed we could make it work, and we did. And our business turned transaction profitable.
So is that kind of the way you see peer-to-peer, in the sense that it's a capital investment at first, it's not going to make money at first, but eventually it will? I guess I'm trying to determine whether to look at something like what you're doing in peer-to-peer payments, what others are doing, as sort of a gateway into other services, and that the other services are still sort of more important, or if you see peer-to-peer something that is eventually going to evolve into just the way that people bank.
I think peer-to-peer is pretty fundamental. I think being able to just as easily send money to you or pull out my card and use that money at a coffee store for dinner is, those two things are linked. And the simpler we can make that so that people don't have to think about different systems, the more it's going to be utilized. So I don't see it as a gateway necessarily. I just, it's an annoyance that we can fix. And we can make easier, and I think we can make more fair, and we can make more useful and build more utility around. So it wasn't ever a question of can we monetize this, or is peer-to-peer, something that one can't monetize. I think it's just a question of where can we add value, and there are things that people value, and speed is one of them. And networks value utilizing their network and handling risk as well. So we get paid on that side too.
So when I look at Square's offerings right now, you have a loan, part of your business. You are allowing people to hold balances within Square. They're able to make deposits within Square. They're able to pay for things with Square. You now have a physical prepaid card that you're shipping to people. I have one.
I know where you're going with this.
I think a lot of people probably know where I'm going with this. Basically, you're doing all, and you're FDIC insured, all transactions.
No.
They're not. Okay.
Our bank partner is.
Your bank partners are. So aside from that, and aside from offering interest on some of the balances that are being held, you are getting closer and closer to a bank. Is Square going to become a bank?
Well, so we have a lot of peers in our industry that went out and said, we're here to kill the banking industry and the financial networks and cash as a concept. And we've always taken a different mindset. We've taken more of a partnership mindset. And we believe that what they have is useful. The financial system is useful, but it's not accessible. And it's not always fair. And it's often obscure, which hides a lot of information, which actually encourages negative behaviors, which take fees from people. And some of that is probably by design. So we saw that, and we wanted to make sure that we are building something that was fair, that extended the reach of the financial network to as many people as possible, and enabled as many people as possible to participate. So we don't need to become a bank to save a trip to the bank. And we saved a trip to the bank the first time when we said, you don't need to go to a bank to get a merchant account. You can just go to the App Store and download an app. And you don't even need to sign up for a merchant account. You just put in your name, password, and where we can ship you a reader, and you're done. And that saved people having to go to a bank branch. And the second trip we saved was with a Square Capital loan. And what's interesting about this is we really thought like we were competing with financial institutions for a while, and we thought we were competing with like Lending Club and On Deck and all these people who are lending. And then we realized that a bank can't actually make money from a $6,000 loan. So again, we looked at what are we actually competing with? Like when a merchant or a seller needs a $6,000 loan, they're not going to a bank, so where are they going?
And is that the average amount that people are borrowing?
That's the average amount. Where are they going? They're going to friends or family. So they're going to their friends, they're going to their parents, and they're asking for $6,000 to start a business or to grow their business, and that's actually who we're competing with. We're competing with them going to a friend or family to get a bit of money. Not too much, because they don't want to go to a bank and get $100,000 and have that debt. They just want the right amount. And that was a job that wasn't being served, and it wasn't being served well by anyone. And we could do it because we had such a deep understanding of our seller and what they needed and when they needed it. And we could make it into, instead of an application process, an invite process. So Square Capital works just by, you'll get an email in your inbox saying, do you want $6,000 or do you want $10,000? And you just hit one button. It's in your bank account the next day, so you can use it. And the way you pay it back is every time you make a sale and swipe a credit card, we take a little fee on the top, and it's just paid back automatically. So we don't need to become a bank to do that.
Mm-hmm. So it's different from traditional banking, and it's different from traditional lending.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm wondering if any of the big tech companies, you could be yourselves, could be someone like Apple, someone like Amazon, they already have this kind of transactional nature with their customers. They have huge cash files. They've established trust with customers, and people already consider them to be primary commerce engines for them, in their lives. I mean, do you think it's possible that in the next 5 to 10 years we would see any of these big tech companies become banks as we've traditionally known them?
I think the definition of a bank will evolve rather than companies becoming, or tech companies becoming more like banks. And I think, things like digital currencies and the blockchain change the definition as well. When you don't have particular parties who control the currency or any of the gates, it requires a new definition. And so banking has, banking started in the 1600s in Florence, and it hasn't evolved that much, but the technology hasn't evolved that much. And I do believe that what we now have with the blockchain is a step function that allows for a pretty dramatic evolution that we need to really study how this impacts society, how it impacts our business and our industry.
And how it impacts the unbanked as well.
And how it impacts
how
the
important is the unbanked sort of category to you right now? I mean, I think about, saw something that Accenture recently put out a report that up to a third of the world's adults have no sort of form of formal banking that they're using, right? So the unbanked population is huge. And in a lot of ways, you sort of already are catering to the unbanked population, but in certain geographic areas. Are you looking at expanding deeper into other markets?
Well, so I mean, I think there's a significant issue in the United States, not just with the unbanked, but with just the underserved, and the, I guess, underbanked. So, you know, when we started close to 9 years ago, we were reaching merchants who didn't have a lot of services from banks, were being denied services like merchant accounts from banks because of their credit. And the only instrument the bank had to vet someone was a credit check and FICO score, and it wasn't a strong indicator of performance or risk tolerance for a seller. So that was the first thing that we said we're not sending people through. We need to figure out another way to vet identity. And we also took on a different mindset. We're going to invite everyone in and then watch and observe. And if we see negativity, we'll ask them to leave, versus no one gets in unless you pass a test. So we just changed that a bit, and that was a big part of our success. So we've seen underserved sellers, and with Square Cash, we've seen a lot of underserved individuals as well. So we have evidence to show that, you know, people are coming on to Square Cash and they're downloading the app, and they're using us as a primary spending device. And in some cases, they're not even linking a bank account or a credit card. They're coming to us, and you know, they have a stored value account, and they request money from their parents or their friends, and you know, we can issue them a physical card now, and that's what they use. So I do believe we have the potential of reaching more of the underserved and potentially the underbanked as we get better and better at having an onboarding process that allows more people. I think ours is pretty good right now. One of the things you'll notice with Square Cash is it doesn't require a password. So we figured out to provide a secure peer-to-peer network and also a spending instrument without requiring a password. And that was because we started with this email concept. And I think it's very innovative, and it also makes it feel much faster and feels more like paper cash. But as we get newer technologies like the blockchain and like digital currency, that security goes up, the speed potentially goes up. There's a lot more work to be done to get there. But the trust also goes up. And that is the most important thing in finance and moving money is, and to provide financial services, is that people actually trust you. And that trust comes from transparency, it comes from being honest, it comes from realizing it's never too late to do the right thing, and making sure that we're serving our customers in that right way. So yeah, those are the more important principles for us.
But your focus on the unbanked right now is primarily in the States. I'm getting that sense.
It's in the States because we feel like there's a lot of work to do here. And a lot of, you look at M-Pesa, for instance, and that's an innovation which is hugely inventive, that is using a whole different basis of currency as well. It was phone credits.
Yep.
And as we look at a market like that, where do we add value? It's not clear right now. So we only want to be in places where we believe we're going to add some significant value. And right now it's in the markets that we're in. So it's US, Canada, UK, Japan. Japan is interesting because we entered the market when they didn't accept credit cards. We were the first time you could actually start accepting credit cards without doing an in-person 30-minute interview with a government agent. We were the first ones that digitized it. So before us, you had to meet a government agent in person and go through a whole interview.
Just to set up a credit card
Just to start accepting credit cards.
Just to accept them as
Just to accept them. Just to accept them. And the amazing thing about Japan is there is zero fraud. So, we deal with risk and fraud all the time in the United States, obviously. We had one case of merchant fraud in Japan, and it was out of merchant negligence, and he realized it, and he apologized to us, and he said, "Can I pay you for my mistake?" And we said, "No, it's okay. You're the one case in 5 years."
What was the item purchased?
I don't even remember what the case was. It was just negligence on his part. It was just, being naive about something, and it was like the one time we ever saw fraud. I should knock on wood somewhere, but
Yeah.
But we have a system to detect everything, so we're good. So every market is completely different, and if we think we can add value to it, we will. But right now, we think there's so much more to do here in this country, especially around peer-to-peer and fair access to the economy.
So I get the sense that you're into blockchain right now. You've mentioned it a few times. Let's talk about blockchain. So, but first I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask you to define blockchain for people who may not have a full grasp of it, and it's okay. How many people here feel they're very familiar with blockchain and what it is? Okay. So I was in your boat a few weeks ago when someone asked me to host a breakfast on blockchain, and I said yes, and then spent several hours the night before trying to understand it. So, so why don't you illuminate us, please?
Well, one simple way to describe it is it's a database. So it is like what we've seen with most interesting technologies. Technology it gets more empowering when it gets more decentralized, and when there are less gatekeepers and less obviously centers of control. So our ability and capability to coordinate disparate machines all over the world is that understanding of the internet and the manifestation of the internet in general. Our understanding of how to coordinate data is the cloud, and our understanding of how to coordinate computing is distributed computing and cloud computing. So the next big unlock was this concept that is often thought in accounting terms, but can be applied to so much more, which is a ledger. And being able to distribute and decentralize a ledger enables proof of work and proof of one entity in an untrusted network, and the same thing that we've created with the cloud and the internet. So assuming a hostile or mistrust in the network or distrust in the network, we can still account for value creation and transfer of value as well. So that's how I would define it and think about it, is how do we think about implementing a distributed ledger, and how does that make our work more efficient? How does that distribute trust? And when you talk about distributing trust and identity, there's so many problems that we can help solve that are not just related to finance, but finance is an obvious one.
I saw a quote that I think if blockchain is the internet, then you might look at one of the specific cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin as email. It's one version of something that is occurring within that framework, or one version of the transaction that is occurring. as I understand it. I want to back up a little bit and talk about Bitcoin specifically. Are you invested in Bitcoin? Do you follow Bitcoin? Is that something you're?
Yeah, so one of the principles at Square was we're going to help a seller make the sale. And that means whatever form of payment comes across the counter, be it physical or digital, we're going to enable them to accept. So that really broadened our thinking. It wasn't just credit cards. We're going to help them accept cash and help them accept checks. And they should never have to think about what someone is using to pay them. They should just think about how to make the sale. And the buyer should never have to compromise on what they want to use or what they have access to, more importantly. So when Bitcoin first came out, we built acceptance into our online stores so that any one of our customers going to one of our online stores could use Bitcoin to purchase. Now, back then, a lot of our sellers were, selling candles and, bags of coffee and incense and stuff, and people weren't using Bitcoin to buy that sort of stuff. So we saw 2 or 3 sales a day. So it was interesting for us because we got to learn how to apply the technology, and it fit with this principle that we had. But it wasn't enough to really say we need to shift all focus towards this. Recently, one of the most surprising things that I have experienced in this space is I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I have a lot of friends and family who are not into technology, I'm effectively their IT support when I go home. I fix the printers, and often case
back up the iPhones.
I fix the fax machine. And one of the, over the holidays, one of the questions I kept getting asked by just the people I know and also people I met around St. Louis was, "Oh, you work in you work in technology, you work in finance. How do I buy Bitcoin?" And I asked, "Why do you want to buy Bitcoin?" And they said, "I heard it's a pretty fast, easy way to make money." And so you want to treat it like an investment? And they yeah, someone said it's digital gold. So
about the price of gold right now.
So I'm buying digital gold, and I how do I do that? I've heard so much about Bitcoin, and it's just amazing how mainstream the brand is, and it's not about currency at all. To these people asking me this question, it's an investment. And one of the interesting things about the paper is the fact that one of the incentives that Satoshi wanted to put out there was that he wanted to incentivize saving instead of spending. He wanted to, or this group, I shouldn't say he, wanted to create a deflationary currency, which meant that it had to be finite, and that it would potentially always go up in value because it was a scarce resource. So people have actually grasped onto this concept of it is kind of like gold. And it's this weird digital asset that I don't know how to buy, but if I buy it, it's going to have some ups and downs, but the trends have generally been up. And if I stick with it, I buy $10 worth or $25 worth or $100 worth, I might make a little bit, and then I can sell it. So that to me is pretty fascinating, and that's something worth looking into.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you agree that Bitcoin is a new kind of gold or any type of cryptocurrency?
I don't know if I have to agree with it. That's how people are using it right now. So the market is telling us that that's what it's being used for. So have I bought some? Yes. Do I treat it like that? Yes. Have I,
How much have you bought?
Not as much as others that I've heard of have bought. So, I've thought about, I bought some, and then, could I spend Bitcoin at this coffee store? And what would that be like? And then you realize, well, this thing is deflationary. It just keeps going up. Mm-hmm. And like, if I buy that $3 coffee today, 2 weeks later, it could be $100. That's the most expensive coffee I've ever bought. And so it's just interesting to think about, because like, it's been, labeled by, so many people as currencies, which it does have over time, some attributes around, but that's not how people are using it today. And I think, that's always the interesting question is like, what job is it serving for people today? And, the job it's serving people today is like, it's a quick way to potentially make some money. Mm-hmm. And it's cool, and it's interesting, and it's new, and it's different from the stock market or other securities or gold, which someone today in our offsite described as gold is a stupid rock. And I guess to like a generation coming in this space, it is. Mm-hmm. And this is something that they want to participate in. They don't fully understand it, but they want to. And we should really ask more questions about that.
What are the bigger implications of having a cryptocurrency out there in the world that is deflationary, that doesn't know borders, that isn't government backed or government owned in any way, that anyone around the world can just access and trade in a pretty secure way, it seems? I'm just thinking about sort of the geopolitical implications. Like, what does that actually mean if this becomes a real thing?
There's so many. You just look at the attributes as to why one would want a digital currency. One, you would want it to be free. You would want it to be convenient, which it is with digital. You would want it to work anywhere, which it is with global. Those are the three attributes that I would value the most. People do value the anonymity as well. And I think for those who need to speak in a pseudonym or anonymous fashion, or take action in that way, it's important. But to me, those would not be necessarily the leading indicators. So I generally believe any technology that helps us see that we're, as a civilization, all in this together, and the sooner we can remove some of these barriers that we put up between us, which we have seen with communication, we have seen with media, and I imagine we will see with money and currency in our lifetime. And if we remove these barriers and we continue to recognize, acknowledge we're all in this together, and we're facing really big problems that we need to focus on, like the environment, like health and death, and increasing our health span and potentially increasing our lifespan, and economic disparity, and enabling people to participate more fully. Those three things are massive and require all of our attention instead of all these distractions that we put in front of ourselves. So you take out the distraction of having multiple currencies and have one way to trade, and you get to focus that time on more meaningful things. So that to me is the idealistic positive that I get excited about. But again, it's super idealistic. So we need to make it practical, and we need to build bridges to get there. But they're all possible.
Mm-hmm. Distractions like Twitter. Certain people on Twitter, perhaps. Well, I want to ask you one more quick question about blockchain before we move on from that, which is there's been some discussion about whether or not blockchain could be utilized in industries outside of financial services, because right now that's been sort of the primary focus. Do you think that's possible? And I just saw a news report the other day that China is potentially using blockchain to collect taxes. And China, I think, has been working on its own digital currency for a while. But And that's still in financial services in some way, but what about, and you mentioned media, what about the exchange of media? What about the exchange of, I don't know, other things that could be done with blockchain?
I mean, I think there's going to be a bunch of people who like, blockchain, let's go apply it everywhere. And let's, try to solve every single problem with it in the same way that we try to solve every problem with machine learning and data science and deep learning and artificial intelligence. And I think, we need to be more thoughtful of like, what are people struggling with? And how does the technology help them progress, or how does it distract them? And so by, back to Lilybell, our first, merchant besides Jim, my co-founder, she didn't struggle with accepting credit cards. She struggled with missing a sale because she couldn't accept a payment device that someone wanted to use. And those are the questions we should ask for. So if you ask that question, I mean, there's a ton. I think there was a report not too long ago about Spotify acquiring a blockchain company to help with its distributed payouts and extremely complicated royalty schedule that it has to manage. So that's a super creative solution to a real problem that the company is obviously struggling with and is very mechanical, and can be fixed by this, by this distributed ledger. So yeah, I would approach it more from that, like what are the fundamental problems we're struggling with that we can create more efficiencies around, and then go from there. There's going to be a bunch of answers.
So there will be people who just say we're using blockchain because blockchain is a thing, but you're
sure
saying it doesn't make sense.
100 companies already that are
until
doing
you, right. Are you?
No.
Okay, just had to ask.
We're trying not to.
So, all right. I think we're going to get to audience questions momentarily, but I do want to ask you a couple of questions about Twitter, starting with how you're currently splitting your time. I know you get asked this a lot, but you are running 2 companies concurrently. Also chairman on the board at Disney, which
I'm not chairman of the board.
No,
I'm
I
on
was
the
just
board.
going to say, not chairman of that board, but chairman
Bob
of
is
the other
chairman of the
boards.
board.
Yeah. And so how are you spending? Are you dividing your time evenly right now between Square and Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, I think we often emphasize.
Thank you.
I think it's easy to go back to time, and in the early days it was a matter of time for me. But to me, it's really what we do with the time, and to me, it's a question of focus and like what we are actually spending our time on. So it's not about 50% of my time here and 50% of my time here. It's like, how are we spending this 1 hour that we have, and are we focused on the most important thing right now? And if not, why are we even talking about it? And that mindset allows a whole lot more flexibility in my schedule. And this is independent of Twitter and Square. It's just like life. I want to get to an answer of like, what is the most important thing right now that I need to be thinking about and spending my time on and talking with people about. And if it's not that, then why am I spending any time on it, or why am I talking about it? And it's just, it goes back to that ultimate constraint of we only have so many hours in the day, we only have so many days on the planet. So am I doing something that I feel proud of and that's meaningful? And so that's how I balance things. It's just really understanding what my priorities are, and really understanding what matters and what doesn't matter, and having people around me that are tell me what's up if they disagree with what I think matters, and that's both in work and also in my personal life too.
Do you feel, I mean, Square is doing very well right now, and Twitter has its own unique struggles because it is a unique social network and a unique platform. Do you feel in some ways that you are prioritizing things differently because of how successful Square has been lately and because of the struggles that Twitter has?
No, they both have different needs and they're both in different phases, and I'm going to do whatever it takes and whatever I can do to help make both live up to their potential. And I think the potential is great, and I think they're both enduring companies that I want to set up so they outlive me and they're not dependent upon me. So that's what I'm focused on. And as individuals, as humans, like sometimes we're going through a lot of really bad stuff, and sometimes we're going, it's good. And we certainly change our approach and it puts things into focus, but focusing on one thing doesn't mean that you completely lose sight of something else. So I don't know. It doesn't feel complicated to me. And it doesn't feel complicated to me because it feels like we have a shared sense of what matters. And as long as we have that, as long as we're holding each other accountable to that, then we'll do the right thing.
I mean, do you say that it seems as though there has been a lot of vitriol on Twitter in recent months, right? And some of it's coming from high-profile people, and some of it's just happening because it's a social network, and this is what happens on social networks, right? And you, it seems, are constantly caught up in this kind of, some people are saying, well, you should kick the president off Twitter, and some people are saying, well, that goes against the freedom of speech, right? And so like that has to be something I imagine you're grappling with. And I remember when you were interviewed at the Code event last December, you said it's complicated. You said it was complicated. I mean, has your thinking around that evolved at all in recent months?
Has my thinking evolved of it being complicated?
More or less complicated?
Look, I mean, we have to hold. We're a service. We're a company, and we have published rules, and we have to hold every single account to them, independent of who's behind them. That said, I do believe that the more we hear and see how our leaders think and act, the more we can hold them accountable. And I'd rather those conversations be in the open than them be in the dark. And the constraint on that we have to make sure we're balancing is actions that are inspired from reading and from seeing and from sharing those thoughts. So I don't know many other ways to solve that than just shining as much light as possible on it and having as open and as transparent a conversation about it, so that we can get to a common understanding faster. But look, we're pushing ourselves to learn as quickly as possible, and as the rest of the world is, on how to deal with the velocity of the technologies that we now have. And that, I think, is what has changed most fundamentally. And with any technology, it's just speed. Like, the technology is a tool that helps people do things faster. And that do things faster can be really scary at first. But it also has the potential to save a bunch of time and a bunch of effort. And so I'm an optimist, and I'm positive, and I'm an idealist, and sometimes maybe blindly so. But I do believe that that openness and transparency can help us realize, again, we're all in this together, and we need to come together. And all these barriers that we put up are distracting to the real problems that we need to solve together.
Great. Okay, we've got a bunch of questions here, so maybe we can do a little rapid fire round. Thank you for submitting these. The first one, sit-down restaurants, where does Square fit in that interaction? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually kind of routed around this because when we first went to restaurants, we would say, like, do you want to make more sales by accepting credit cards? Because we learned how to ask the right questions. And they said, yeah, do you do reservations as well? And we said, no, that seems really complicated, table management, something we don't want to get into right now. So we decided not to build a point of sale for restaurants. What we decided to do was look at ways to continue to drive more sales to restaurants. And the superpower that we found was delivery. So the interesting thing about restaurants is they're constrained by their physical size and the number of tables they have and how quickly they can turn them over. Their kitchen can actually produce more than the number of tables they can have. So a lot of restaurants go to delivery, but they have to manage the delivery staff then, and that can be really messy and can be a ton of work. So we found a company called Caviar that had its own delivery fleet and had a deep relationship with restaurants, and we could just send a customer through an app. I want to order, some fried chicken and a soda, and I want it to come to me. And we could send a courier, pick up the food, and then send it to the customer. And all the restaurant had to do was focus on its kitchen. So it seemed amazing, and we've done really, really well with that business because of that focus. And now we're extending that to, it's maybe not just delivery. We have a bunch of competition in the delivery space, of food in particular. What if we were to shift the mindset a bit and instead of focusing on delivery of food, focus on just food and just ordering food? So that enabled us to think about pickup as well. So we want to be a place when you're hungry, you go to Caviar and you get to choose what you want to eat, obviously, and then do you want to go pick it up? Do you want to sit down? Or do you want it to come to you? And that feels like a much broader market and something that also aligns with that principle of driving more sales to a customer we couldn't reach because we didn't want to do table management.
Okay, so still no point of sale within restaurants, but delivery through Caviar. Okay. What's the first thing you do when evaluating a new idea?
Build it. Because we have this principle at Square called show don't tell, and what we meant to do with that, and what we meant to tell the company and ourselves was, you can't just go to someone with an idea. I want to be able to show how something works, and I want people to feel it, and I want them to finish our sentences. I want them to engage our imagination. So let's do the work to actually make the thing work, and then present it to, the company or to our customers, and then learn from that. And in that evaluation from our customers or from our colleagues, we'll get a bunch of critique and we'll learn a bunch, and it'll be something that we should continue to invest in or we shouldn't at all. And that's always worked for me. So with Twitter, we didn't go to any investors until we had hundreds of thousands of people using it. And with Square, we didn't go to anyone outside Jim, my co-founder, until we had something that worked. And we didn't go to VCs, we didn't go to angel investors, we didn't go to Visa until we had something that worked and we were proud of. And that was the best way for us to evaluate it. Otherwise, there's just so many excuses or things we should do or things we shouldn't do, and then the idea gets really convoluted and way too big, and then it becomes something that's not really solving a problem.
I imagine there would have to be some type of evaluation process that goes on first, because you can't just build every idea, or you wouldn't have the time in your day to do that.
Well, we have a lot of people who can do that now too, though.
That's true. You just delegate. Okay. For someone that wants to be in your shoes in 10 years, what does he or she have to do? Buy Bitcoin.
I mean, I think the most important thing for me was to really be clear about what I wanted to build in the world and what I wanted to be, and more importantly, what I didn't want to be. So having self-awareness, so you understand where your strengths are and where your gaps are, and that's not a one-time event. It's always ongoing. Having a clear sense of what your purpose is, or what you want your purpose to be, is really important. And then just, a lot of hard work and a lot of putting yourself out in very uncomfortable situations. Like when I was a kid, I had a speech defect. I could not pronounce pretty much any word, and I had to go to a speech therapist for years before I felt comfortable even speaking with people. So it made me super shy, and it caused me to really withdraw, and I got a lot of qualities from that. I became an introvert. I'm very focused on my intuition and my gut feeling, and those are positives, but I wasn't able to do anything like this. So when I was 12, I just said, I gotta get over this. I gotta be able to talk with people, and I joined the speech club, and I joined the debate team at my school, and I did something that freaked me out, which was this improv speech, which they give you 5 minutes and a topic that you'll never, you would have no hope of understanding as a 12-year-old, and you had to write a 5-minute speech in 5 minutes on that topic and sound like you knew what you were talking about. And it was such an amazing exercise. And it really made me uncomfortable. And that really focused me on what I needed to improve. So I think that sense of, there's this book called Growth Mindset, which talks about a very simple 3-point process that you can go through with everything, which is observe, learn, improve. So become a really good listener and observer of how people act and what you do, and just watch, and then go into learn, which is understanding and putting patterns together and recognizing how things connect, and then how do you use those understanding and those patterns to improve, and ideally improve yourself. And I think the responsibility I have to my company and to my family and to my friends is self-improvement, to really better myself every single day in some ways. So just taking on that mindset of I'm going to work really hard and feel really uncomfortable, aligned with my purpose and understanding what my gaps are, to get better every single day, has helped me in the past 10 years.
Good advice. Lots of people ask this question. What competition, if any, do you plan for or foresee with Apple's iOS 11 iMessage Apple Pay integration? Which is an excellent question. iOS 11 is it's in beta right now. It's supposed to come out in the fall. And one thing that Apple is doing now is peer-to-peer payments directly in their iMessage app, which has a huge user base. So are you planning? I mean, it's interesting because you also work with Apple in a lot of ways. So talk a little bit about that relationship and how you're planning for the launch of this competitor.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so there's a lot of areas we can collaborate, and some where we'll obviously compete. We're here because of the iPhone. It's enabled us. It's enabled so much in our company. The fact that there's a supercomputer in everyone's pocket, and that it was general purpose enough that we could hook a reader into it, is amazing. So we have, so much gratitude for what that company has done, from our business, but also personally. So we have to see what people do with it, obviously, and we need to actually see it. I haven't seen it. I've seen the keynote of it, but
I've seen it.
okay, well, you can probably tell me. But I think one of the attributes we have is we are cross-platform, and we have a really open network, and that's really important to us. So I think there's value in being at the intersection of platforms and the intersection of things, rather than being on the platform. We've also found, we have always wondered about messaging and money movement. And that's how we started. We started with email. And then we moved to an app. And we found that, people really like single focus, single purpose applications, and that has been a strength of ours. So we'll see if that actually plays out as it becomes omnipresent and everywhere. But more and more, I think we're seeing Square Cash not as peer-to-peer, but as a spending device. And you can spend money with your friend, with your parent, which is the peer-to-peer use case, but we're seeing more and more of our activity go into our card and go into the stored value. And we think there's a whole lot more we could do there that really excites us. So yeah, it really, you look at our whole business and the ecosystem of all the service that we're providing and all the potential intersections between them, there's a lot of interesting things there.
Okay. Credit card companies collect transaction data from their cardholders and sell that data. Does Square collect and sell user data?
No. We wanted to make sure that our job with data was to provide insights to the people that own it, which is our customers. So our seller customers come first and foremost. So our job, and I think our value, is take all the data that they have, all the data that they see, and then bubble it up into insights that they can actually make decisions around. So this is how cappuccinos are trending over time. This is how many new customers you have versus consistent customers you have. At the same time, we want to make sure that their customers had control over what data they were sharing with Square, because that's where it goes to. We don't enable a buyer, a customer, to share their, or we don't enable a seller to see the email address or phone number of a buyer, for instance. But we have given a button to a buyer on the receipt that says, this seller can add me to their newsletter, or this seller can offer me rewards. So we've opted more for really simple, straightforward controls for the buyer customer, and then insights and more data for the seller customer.
But in the case of something like the Square physical card, which is a Visa card, in that case, Visa is getting information based on the purchases made with that card. Anything that's, the issuers are still getting that information.
They are getting that information. We don't control what data they share or choose not to share.
But anything that's siloed within Square and does not involve an issuer.
Yeah, we give it back to the seller in terms of insights and back to the buyer in terms of options and control.
Okay. Several European countries, sorry, I just hit the microphone. Several European companies will phase out checks in 10 years. While bills and coins are going extinct across the world, why is the US lagging? Can the US catch up and be a leader in a cashless world?
It's a funny thing because we've always been laggards in adopting technologies. Like this is, the same was true when Twitter started. Like we started the service in 2006, and 2005 was the first year that SMS, text messaging, really became a thing in this country. And that's surprising to people, everyone outside of this country, because they had been using it for 10 years prior. So for 10 years, people were using SMS to communicate with each other very reliably, and doing more so than phone calls. We didn't have it in this country because of you could not send a text from Singular to Verizon. We didn't have any cross-carrier ability to send text messages because they were two different technology stacks. So you had GSM, which is what SMS is based on, and CDMA, which was Verizon and an older trunk system. So because of those different stacks, the two could not communicate, and then they made a bridge, and suddenly text messaging just blew up here. So I imagine we're seeing similar things where we have parties in the network who are holding on very, very tightly to what they own and what they have, and not necessarily being open or forward-looking in terms of how utilizing a single technology or a common technology or a standard could help grow their business, or not doing the work to look at where they can add value elsewhere in their business as well. So that's probably the reason, but I don't know. We have traditionally been very slow to adopt these newer things that the rest of the world gets first.
Well, there's also instances in emerging markets where people are using mobile because they've had to leapfrog us because the infrastructure simply wasn't in place or isn't in place still. So.
Yeah. And that's fascinating to learn from too, is like, there's countries and communities all over the world who are just skipping things that we've had to go through. And actually not just skipping things to arrive at the same place, but arrive like 5 years ahead of us in this country. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to learn from.
Yes. I already asked this. How do you divide your time between Twitter and Square? Unless you'd like to answer again.
No.
Okay. Moving on. You spoke a lot about adding value in solving problems. As a young entrepreneur, how should I raise enough capital and hire technical talent to growth before monetizing?
How should I?
How should I raise enough capital and hire technical talent, I think, to grow rather than to the growth before monetizing?
I mean, this is going to be a different answer for what you're doing, but like having an awareness of what you absolutely need and then adding a little cushion for the unknown, I think is generally a good formula. I think, we live in a world right now where we could do a whole lot more with a whole lot less, and we're looking at that in both companies in terms of like, how do we become a lot more efficient. One of the things I learned from my mom. My mom owned a coffee store when I was a kid, and she is this little coffee store in St. Louis, Missouri, and she employed me and my two brothers, and I hated coffee, and I hated tea, but she made me the barista. And fortunately for me, not many people in St. Louis really knew what a good tasting cappuccino tasted like. So I would just make them, and they'd be like, "This is the best tasting cappuccino I've ever had." I'm like, "This is the first one I've ever made, thank you." And I would always ask her the question, why don't we be like Starbucks? Why don't we open another location? Why don't we go around the world? Why don't we, go global and like sell in supermarkets? And why don't you have that ambition? And I would ask her this question, and she would say, "That's not what I want. Like, I want to provide a place for my neighborhood to get together, and buying beans and getting coffee might be the reason, but the result is that the neighborhood gets to come together and see each other and talk." And we lived in St. Louis is extremely segregated, north-south, and my parents always lived right in the middle. So it was right on the center point, and it actually worked. The people from the north and south came together and they talked. And it took me a long time to learn this, but I realized that one of the powers of technology is not necessarily to get big really fast. It's actually to be able to make the choice to stay small. And my mom wanted to stay small. She didn't want to go broad, she wanted to go deep. And I just think that's so cool. So I would look for ways to like do as much as possible with as few resources as possible, because that's what everyone around the world is going to figure out how to do. And that's really stunning. And we've seen some examples of this in our company. Square Cash is an interesting example where it is our smallest team in the company. It's also our most distributed team. We have no center of gravity for engineering. We have engineers in San Francisco and Kansas City, Missouri, and Waterloo, and Sydney, and Melbourne, and Sweden, and Austin, Texas. Probably just hired people in places I'm not aware of yet. I think that's so cool. And they figured out not only how to distribute themselves completely, but also to be one of the fastest moving teams in the company as well. So they're small and super distributed. And I think that is that is the future of our workplaces and our companies. Like, we have these big offices in San Francisco for both Twitter and Square. I think the mega offices and these huge campuses are history. I think, those things are going away. And I think it's just so liberating as well, that I could work from anywhere and impact the world from anywhere. And that's, I think it's an expectation of the generation coming to the workforce as well.
Next question. As peer-to-peer, digital wallet, and other non-traditional banking grows, how do you think government regulators will respond both here and internationally?
As they have for the past, as they have for the past 40 years. I think there'll be a lot of skepticism, and I think Patrick Collison of Stripe said this really well when he said that our job at our company is to help educate regulators, and you take on that mindset of like, we're not against the regulators, we're going to help educate them. It really opens the door for a healthy and progressive and forward-looking conversation. So I imagine, like, their job is to somewhat be on the defensive and to protect particular interest. And ideally, they're the interest of individuals. Doesn't always manifest in that way. And those are the things we need to question. And those are the things we need to educate around. We saw this, for example, in, we love software, we love hardware, but we had this rule and this regulatory body that in order for us to get outside the United States and to serve in markets that required a dip of a chip and a pin, we had these regulators tell us that the only secure way to do that, and the only way it will allow you to do that, is a hardware-based pin pad. And that just did not seem logical to us. Because with hardware, if there was an issue, it's really slow to update it, or we have to recall it. It's also really expensive to put a physical keypad on a piece of hardware. So if we had to put a physical keypad on our hardware, it would raise the cost, meaning that less people could afford it, and we would see less customers and empower less people in the economy. So we were super stubborn, and we tried our best to educate as much as possible about, look, if we, for over 10 years, it wasn't 10 years at the time, but over 10 years, people have been entering in a PIN into their device to unlock it, and they seem pretty comfortable with it. It seems pretty secure. And then, we also said if there is a security issue, we can update it instantly. And security is not an endpoint. It's a constant evolution. It's always staying 10 steps ahead and being faster than the exploits. So we tried to educate them of, like, this is not an endpoint and it has to constantly evolve, and software allows us to constantly evolve much faster. And it took us 3 years to change that regulation, and then we did, and we launched in Australia, and that enabled us to launch in the UK as well. So it's a push, and it's not going to happen overnight. But I do like that concept of it being a task of education rather than a fight.
Do you see Stripe as competitive, by the way? What's your relationship with Stripe, since you mentioned them?
There's things we compete on, and there's a lot of things that we don't. Stripe is serving a customer that is typically a startup or online, and is building very quickly, and we focused on the offline. We focused on physical sellers, and we've have definitely gone online, but we're not going after it in, like, we need to be the e-commerce platform for the world and for every developer. We're looking at what our customers actually need, and what they're telling us is, like, I sell offline, I want to sell online too. So this quote-unquote omni-channel is where we're focused on. And then we have a bunch of online sellers who are doing pop-up shops and doing physical retail because they want physical presence. So that's where we fit perfectly. So yeah, I mean, we're always going to compete with every company
Always
in
processing
some
that
regard,
way,
and
right.
and in others we're not. But the cores of what we're doing, we're not.
Last question. Considering the increasingly contested market for peer-to-peer payments, where do you see Square Cash playing a role in Square's future and success? We did kind of touch on this earlier, but maybe we could answer it again. But there's a follow-up question here, which is Square open to additional partnerships, such as with Snapcash? If he says yes, would love to talk with Jack about Square Cash and our product. He or she, I think it's a he, left a phone number for you. It is 650, no, I'm just kidding, I'm not going to read it here, but it's from Yanir. And yeah, so first, Square Cash, where does it fit into Square's future? And are you open to additional partnerships, such as with Snapcash?
Yes, we are open to additional
Oh, well, here you go. Here's his number.
I'll take your phone number. Thank you. And how does it fit into our overall ecosystem? And I mean, I think our main job is moving money around. So, you know, we move money in the physical space with our card reader, and we move money in the purely digital space with Square Cash. And we don't talk about this a lot, but Square Cash also has Square Cash for Business as well. So we have a lot of sellers on Square Cash who are using it, like you know, golf instructors or massage therapists or dog walkers or people who are just selling the couch on Craigslist to request money very quickly without that. They don't need a card reader. They don't need to accept credit cards. But we do charge them as a seller because they sign up as a business. So to me, that gives me a lot of comfort because, you know, we've asked the question at least to disrupt ourselves. What if hardware goes away? We have an answer, which is we have an all software solution. So you know, we want to make sure that we have a multitude of potential answers to the challenges and the struggles that our customers are facing. And some of them are going to be physical, which is how we started, but more and more, and probably all of them will eventually move to all software and all digital. And we have a really good answer there. So that's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm. I have one more question, which is just about the future. Let's say 5 years from now, all of the companies we've talked about tonight, in addition to yours, the Apples of the world, Amazon, Stripe, everyone's offering some version of the same thing. They're processing payments, they're in peer-to-peer, maybe they're at point of sale, maybe they're doing online deliveries. Where is Square? How does Square stand out at that point?
Well, you know, I think we have 4 differentiators that I think set us apart. One, we focused a lot of our energy on speed and being the fastest, and access to funds is critical for people, and that really pushed us. The second was our cohesion. So we're not just offering one part of the equation. You have all the tools that serve the most critical needs in one app. The third is that we're really elegant. And you know, we hear from a lot of our sellers, like, putting a register on my countertop makes me feel proud. It validates my business. Like, I'm in business now. And there's an emotional component to what we do. And then the fourth is we're self-serve. You don't need our help to get started, and you don't need our help to do anything. So it becomes very easy for us to tell the company, like, make it faster, make it more self-serve, make it more comprehensive and cohesive, and you know, so those directives become very easy for any of our folks in the company to go after, and to really continue to set us apart. But ultimately, I just think it's our sense of purpose is what's going to win for us. And we came into an industry that was not fair, that encouraged people into negative behaviors, that didn't allow everyone to participate for the wrong reasons. And we built it right into our name, which is Square. And, like, if you look at the definition, you'll see this phrase, fair and square. And you'll see square up, and you'll see this simple, understandable, common object that's kind of, boring but relatable and a building block. So I don't know, like we have to lean into ourselves and really, focus on what our personality and what sets us apart. And there's attributes to the product and how we do things, but also who we are and what we believe that set us apart as well. So that's what we're doing.
Good thing you didn't stick with squirrel, huh?
Yeah, we were originally called Squirrel.
That's right.
So that was a
Jack
good
Dorsey,
evolution.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.